Hi, and welcome back to the Enigmatic universe. I'm Clifton3D, and today we're going to be checking out a video that is currently going crazy on the internet. It is about historical facts that will mess with your sense of time. So, without further ado, let's get into this. Alright, so before we get too deep into this video, I do want to say, there are a few things that I know will probably come up in this video. I don't want to spoil it for you. I know there's something about a tortoise. I would think they would use this in the video. And, of course, the last guillotine usage. So let's go ahead and get into this video and react to it.
When we try to put historical events into perspective, we often simplistically divide things into old days and modern times because our brains can often struggle with the perception of time. I compiled a series of interesting facts on historical events that surprisingly took place at more or less the same time, turning them into real and pretty fascinating coincidences, and will make you think twice about how you perceive the past. Number 1. The same tortoise belonged to both Charles Darwin and Steve Irwin. Harriet the tortoise was reportedly collected by Charles Darwin during his 1835 visit to the Galapagos Islands as part of his round-the-world survey expedition, then transported to England and then brought to her final home, Australia, by a retiring captain of the Beagle, the ship Darwin used for his expedition. And as we all know, tortoises can live quite a long time, and by a...
Yeah, I believe they can live up to 180 years or something like that. However, I do believe that there was some doubt cast that Darwin ever went there, so who knows if this was actually his tortoise? But, I mean, considering, crazy, actually, if you just consider how long that this tortoise lived, he lived during the time of Darwin and Steve Irwin, so,
A hilarious turn of events, Harriet turned up in Steve Irwin's zoo. That's right, the pet tortoise of Charles Darwin was adopted by the legendary crocodile hunter. However, some doubt was cast on this story by the fact that Darwin had never visited the island that Harriet originally came from. Anyhow, she had an estimated age of 175 by the time she finally died at Steve Irwin's zoo. Number 2. Today's oldest living tree was already 1,000 years old when the last woolly mammoth died.
Wow.
The world's oldest tree is a Great Basin bristlecone pine located in White Mountains, California, and is dated at around 5,000 years old. To put that into perspective, isolated populations of woolly mammoths on Wrangel Island didn't finally go extinct until 4,000 years ago, with the small island in the Arctic Ocean serving as a sanctuary for the great beasts after they were forced from the mainland by humans and climate change. Number 3.
Yeah, but supposedly woolly mammoths are going to be coming back, right? Scientists are working on that, so interesting. Yeah, I'm not really surprised that the oldest tree is in California. They have some pretty old and big trees there, But yeah, the woolly mammoths, okay, we're still alive while the Egyptians were building their pyramids. Not really big surprise, but because I believe the pyramids are even older than what history or historians want to claim that they are. Let's go ahead and continue. I like this so far. Interesting. I mean, the first one, the tortoise, with Darwin and Steve Irwin, of course, I've heard of that. I'm sure that the other one will be coming up here pretty soon. So I'm liking it so far. you know, it's fun.
Woolly mammoths were still alive while Egyptians were building the pyramids. I think this fact is more popular nowadays, but I still want to include it, since it's a true classic. Scientists have determined that woolly mammoths were still roaming the Earth until about 1650 BC.
So
Meanwhile,
about 1,000
the
years.
oldest of the Great Pyramids in Egypt, the Pyramid of Djoser, was constructed between 2630 BC and 2611 BC, meaning that while man was busy building some of the most incredible structures ever made, woolly mammoths were still doing their thing. Number 4, Mahatma Gandhi and Jack the Ripper. Gandhi is so bound up with the titanic events of the 20th century that
That's
it might
right.
be peculiar to imagine him as a dapper gentleman of Victorian society. But that's exactly what he became while studying law in London. Arriving in September 1888, right in the midst of the Jack the Ripper killings. Gandhi obviously had nothing to do with the Jack the Ripper killings.
Obviously, right? Or did he? Maybe they stopped once he went back. No, but this is a historical figure. Very interesting. This is something that the British did in their colonies. You know, they would, you know, put in place people into, you know, administrative positions. In this case, Mahatma Gandhi's father. And, you know, they would send their children off to, you know, take British university classes where he studied law. And I believe he also went to Africa to learn more, you know, so afterwards, another colony of the British, and then later went back to India and used his skills to, you know, make India independent. So it's interesting how that worked. But also interesting that that was during the time of Jack the Ripper, that he went to England and was a proper gentleman.
But it's funny to think about the fact that Gandhi could have become a suspect in the most famous murder case. Number 5, Nintendo was founded when Jack the Ripper...
Okay, so I like how they're connecting, you know, historical things. Nintendo was founded when Jack the Ripper was still on the loose. I know Nintendo is pretty old. I believe they started with playing cards, right? But I really don't know. I don't know when they started to make video games, you know, when their first video game. Maybe we'll find out. Let's see.
Was still on the loose.
But also during this time,
Nintendo were around
crazy.
At the same time, he never got the chance to play classics like Zelda and Mario. They originally made playing cards called Hanafuda, and the company was founded way back in 1889 when the infamous Jack the Ripper was creating havoc on the streets of London. His murder spree happened only about a year before Nintendo came out.
And Nintendo's old.
Number 6. Star Wars came out, the same year as the last guillotine execution in France. When thinking about guillotine executions, our minds wander to historic figures like Napoleon, but this form of execution isn't that old. Star Wars...
You have to imagine people in France like gathering to watch this guillotine, the beheading, and talking about Star Wars. Like, hey, after this, do you want to go watch the new Star Wars? I heard it's pretty good. It's like, what?
Premiered in the United States on May 25th.
But yeah, this is one that I've heard years and years ago. Like, I was like, wow, really? The French were still beheading people with the guillotine? Now, from what I gather, like they hadn't done a guillotine execution in quite some time, but the guy who was put on, you know, murderer's row, he said, I want to be beheaded. So that was his request, I believe. If I can't remember the name of the guy, but I believe that's how it went. I don't think there has been capital punishment in France since
1977. At the same time, this futuristic sci-fi was wowing audiences around the world. The medieval practice of death by guillotine was still taking place in France, where Hamida pimp killer Jandoubi was beheaded for the torture and murder of a young woman. This was the last use of the guillotine in France. Nobody else has been executed using any means since. So technically, it is possible that people were talking about the upcoming Star Wars movie while watching the last guillotine execution. Number 7. You could take the London Underground to the last public hanging in the UK. We continue on with the topic of public executions, but we travel to Britain. Hanging used to be a common punishment in the UK and wasn't abolished until 1868.
I mean, I don't see a problem. 18, you know, I really don't. That's not an issue. 68 for hanging, I think that's, you know, reasonable, considering France was still beheading people with the guillotine in 1977, that is. And, but I guess the first tube, I guess that is kind of...
Michael Barrett was the last to be executed in this manner in Newgate Prison, London, in front of a large crowd of people. 5 years earlier, in 1863, the first journey of the London Underground took place. With a station in operation close by the Newgate Prison, it is entirely feasible that many Londoners would take the tube to go and watch somebody get hanged. What a very convenient situation.
Does sound convenient.
Prisoners arrived.
Ooh, yes. Oh, yes. Mostly, you know, when you're thinking about McDonald's, you're thinking about the 50s and 60s when, you know, there was the boom of McDonald's. It came earlier, I believe, mid 40s or something. I can't remember. I don't remember for sure, but yeah, prisoners arrived at Auschwitz just days after McDonald's was. Oh, so probably 40, right? That was 40s, beginning of 40s, maybe. I'm not entirely sure. Ooh, just hope the next time you go to McDonald's and you eat that Big Mac that you're not thinking of this horrible event. Ooh.
McDonald's was founded. While McDonald's is traditionally associated with the good times and affluence of 1950s America, the very first restaurant was opened much earlier, on May 15th, 1940. At the same time, one of the most gruesome events in human history began in Europe. Just 5 days after McDonald's grand opening, the first prisoners arrived at the Auschwitz concentration camp in what is now Poland. Number 9. The fax machine was invented.
Yeah, so again, you know, go eat McDonald's. Hopefully you don't get, you don't make that connection. Because that would be, you go to McDonald's to eat something, you want to enjoy it. You don't want to think about the horrible acts of the no-no Germans. Fax machine was invented the same year the first wagon crossed the Oregon Trail. A fax machine? During the Oregon Trail. Really? Okay, this one, how does that, did you have phones back then? Obviously, I don't know when the Oregon Trail was offhand. I only know that I played the game in 97 in school.
The same year the first wagon crossed the Oregon Trail. We all know the story of the Oregon Trail since it's an important part of American history. However,
sadly, I was not in the States when this came up in history class. I was already in Germany, so, but
what many don't know is that at the same time the first wagon traversed this trail, an important technological milestone was achieved. The original fax machine, the electric printing telegraph, was patented in 1843 by Scottish inventor Alexander Bain, the same year that about 1,000 people set off west for Oregon, forming a huge wagon train.
1843. A fax machine. 1843. We're going to look this up. 1843. First fax machine, if I can spell things correctly. Dum 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 dum. All right, so it doesn't show a picture. That's what I want. I want to see a freaking picture, images. But all right, so I'm gonna. All right, so you do see what I'm seeing, so. All right, but I mean, really, to me, it doesn't really seem like a. I'm not sure if it's okay. All right, I'm gonna say this. It may be like a precursor to the fax machine that we know today. Seems more like it's a printer copier. Let me know down in the comments below if you know any more about this than I do. Because I'll be perfectly honest, I don't know about it. I do not know about it. But this one, Oxford University existed for hundreds of years before the Aztec Empire was founded. Yeah, this one I knew. Not really a surprise. When you think about the Aztecs, though, you're like, of course you're thinking, oh, of course, ancient times, you know? Ancient times. No, they really didn't have that long to exist before the Spanish came, right?
For 10, Oxford University existed for hundreds of years before the Aztec Empire was founded. The Aztec Empire began as an alliance of 3 Nahuatl city-states.
In
These 3
1519.
city-states ruled the area in and around the Valley of Mexico from 1428 until the combined forces of the Spanish conquistadors and their native allies under Hernán Cortés defeated them in 1521. Aztec culture had rich and complex mythological and religious traditions, as well as achieving remarkable architectural and artistic accomplishments. Meanwhile, in England, Oxford University was already well established. It has no known date of foundation, but there is evidence of teaching as far back as 1096, making it the oldest university in the English-speaking world and the world's second oldest university in continuous operation.
Yeah.
It grew rapidly from 1167 when Henry II banned English students from attending the University of Paris. Number 11.
Okay.
Harvard University didn't offer calculus classes for the first few years after the school was established. Modern calculus was developed in 17th century Europe by Isaac Newton and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who independently of each other first published their findings around the same time. But elements of it appeared in ancient Greece, then in China and the Middle East, and still later again in medieval Europe and in India.
That's crazy.
Harvard was established in 1636.
Okay. I didn't know that Harvard was established that early. But yeah, it's crazy to think that Harvard existed before calculus. That's kind of crazy. I mean, of course, calculus always existed, but the way to, you know, use it.
Is the United States' oldest institution.
And to think that I had calculus back in my day. Of course.
Of higher learning, and its history, influence, and wealth have made it one of the world's most prestigious universities. Calculus was off the curriculum for the first few years for obvious reasons. It hadn't been recognized yet. I find it astonishing that the oldest university in the United States is even older than such an important scientific breakthrough. Number 12.
Definitely.
Ecstasy was invented the same year the Titanic sank. The unsinkable Titanic sank in 1912, going down in the North Atlantic Ocean 4 days into the ship's maiden voyage from South.
But all right, I believe though that meth at the time was supposed to prevent something else and not just, you know, be used as substance. I believe. But yeah, crazy that they created meth at the same time. The Titanic.
Southampton to New York City. In the same year, pharmaceutical giant Merck was interested in developing substances that stopped abnormal bleeding, and one of its chemists, Anton Kolisch, synthesized MDMA to avoid a patient.
Köllisch. Anton Köllisch. Probably German. Or Germanic-speaking, country.
By German rival Bayer. The drug was of no particular interest to Merck at the time, and they only came back to research the substance sporadically over the next few years. It wasn't until 1975 that psychoactive effects of the drug began to be taken seriously, and recreational use spread thereafter through personal networks of psychotherapists, psychiatrists, users of psychedelics, and yuppies. So yes, everyone who died on the Titanic never got the chance to taste this drug. Number 13. Microsoft was founded while Spain was still a fascist dictatorship.
Franco!
A highly controversial figure within Spain, Franco is seen as a divisive leader.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think, that they had a dictatorship until just recently, really. And that they then turned to democracy, It's kind of crazy to think that the Spanish democracy isn't really that old. Crazy.
Credit his strong anti-communist and nationalist views, economic policies, preservation of traditional Spanish practices, and support of the monarchy of Spain as positive influences over the nation. Critics disparage him as an autocratic dictator who violently suppressed opposition and dissent, banned culture seen as non-Spanish, used concentration camps and forced labor, and provided much support to the Axis powers during World War II. Franco ruled Spain as a fascist state up until his death in 1975, aged 82. This was the same year that Microsoft was founded by Paul Allen and Bill Gates, at the beginning of a new era in computer technology. Number 14.
In their basement.
Artist Pablo Picasso died in 1973. The same year, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon was released.
Yeah.
Picasso is...
It's kind of crazy to think that Picasso is actually, also more recent than if you're thinking about Picasso, you're thinking back like, geez, like, yeah, of course, it was, long time ago. About 100 years, give or take now at this point, but still. Is
regarded as one of the most influential artists of the 20th century. Among his most famous works are the proto-cubist Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, 1907, and Guernica, 1937. A dramatic
devoid of color in that last one.
Italian air forces during the Spanish Civil War. Unlike some other great artists who died young, Picasso lived a long and full life until he passed away in 1973, which was, coincidentally, the same year that one of the most groundbreaking and progressive albums ever was released, Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. With an estimated 45 million copies sold, it is Pink Floyd's most successful album and one of the best-selling worldwide. It has been remastered and re-released several times and covered in its entirety by several acts. It produced 2 singles, Money and Us and Them, and is often regarded as one of the greatest albums of all time. I would love to play you some pieces of this album, but that would most likely end with the takedown of this video. But let's be real, if anyone here doesn't know Dark Side of the Moon, you are more in need of a lesson in culture.
Yes.
History.
Yes, go and listen to the music.
Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows was published in the summer of 2007. The same summer, the first iPhone model was released.
Really?
The last book in the Harry Potter series, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, was released in 2007, ending the series that began in 1997 with the publication of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. That same year, something came along that has probably done more to kill children's interest in reading more than anything else: the first iPhone. Considering that the first iPhone seems like a vintage phone now, it's impressive how fast time goes by, and that's exactly why I included this fact on this list. That was almost 20 years ago, and at least to me this really feels like another era. But that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed today's
20
video.
years ago.
Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Dang, almost 20 years ago. Wow, so some of those were pretty damn crazy, I have to say. There were some of them that I didn't know or didn't even, think about. It's like, wow, really? And I didn't know that Picasso lived up to the 70s. Like, wow, you know, but definitely interesting. Go check out the video on their own channel. I'll put the link in the description of this video just to let you know, and give them some love over there. Anyway, I hope you liked this video. Comment down below if there were any events like this that you know of, that you were like, oh yeah, I knew that, or oh wow, that one blew me away, I didn't believe it, or hey, there are a few more that you could check out, look at these. Let me know down in the comments below. And again, if you like this video, smash that like button, consider subscribing and hitting the bell for notifications. All right, until next time, travelers, take care.